Andre Washington was 34 years old, and until that Tuesday morning, he had made peace with being underestimated. He had built a 14-property real estate empire across 3 states entirely in silence. No announcements, no social media, no desire for anyone from his old life to see what the quiet years had produced. Nobody knew, especially not Brielle. She had left him 3 years earlier for a wealthier man, walked away from 4 years and every plan they had made together, and never looked back. He had accepted that. What he could not accept was what Jerome sent him that morning, a screenshot of Brielle's public reply to a follower who asked if she ever regretted leaving her previous relationship. 7 words: public, unbothered, leaving my loser ex who was all dreams and no dollars. Then came the wedding invitation, addressed to him, arriving the same morning. She had actually sent it. Andre read both twice, set his phone face down on the railing, and made a decision. 6 weeks later, he stepped out of his Rolls-Royce Silver Ghost at the Biltmore in Coral Gables. His car, not rented, not borrowed, buttoned his bespoke suit jacket, and handed the valet his key. The crowd went silent. Brielle saw him from across the lobby, and whatever she had expected her loser ex to look like, it was not this. What happened next would cost her far more than she ever imagined, and she never saw any of it coming. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. The city was still dark when Andre Washington stepped onto the rooftop. 5:47 a.m. The Atlanta skyline sat low against a bruised purple sky, the office towers lit up like candles, the highway below just beginning to hum. He held his coffee with both hands and let the steam rise against his face. He didn't check his phone. Not yet. He just stood there and looked at what was in front of him. 14 properties. He didn't say the number out loud. He never did. It lived quietly inside him, the way important things do when you've paid for them in a currency nobody else can see. 14 residential and commercial properties across 3 states, Atlanta, Charlotte, Pittsburgh, managed under the name Washington Property Group, a firm he had built so carefully and so quietly that people in his own neighborhood didn't know it existed. He didn't have a billboard. He didn't have a verified account with a blue check mark. He had buildings, he had tenants, he had a company that worked. That was enough. More than enough. He took a sip of coffee and let the morning settle around him. He had been 29 when he met Brielle Foster, a logistics manager for a regional freight company, pulling a solid salary, living clean, moving steady. He wasn't flashy, but he was building something. Anyone who paid attention could see that. He read everything. He tracked markets. He had spreadsheets on his laptop organized by zip code, by vacancy rate, by median household income. He was planning. Brielle was beautiful in the way that made you forget to be careful. Polished and quick and warm when she wanted to be. She could walk into a room and rearrange it without touching anything. He had loved that about her. He had loved a lot of things about her. They were together 4 years. 4 years of Sunday mornings and long drives and conversations about the future, about land outside the city, about a family, about building something that would still be standing long after they were gone. He had believed every word of it. That was on him. He knew that now. But Brielle didn't want the journey. She wanted to arrive. She wanted the life finished and waiting for her, like a room that had already been decorated. She didn't want to sit with blueprints and patience and the particular kind of faith that building something requires. She wanted to walk in and find it done. So she left. She left, and 6 months later, a letter came from the lending institution where Andre had applied for the startup loan that was supposed to launch Washington Property Group. Denied. No full explanation. Just the language of a closed door. He had sat with that letter for a long time. 3 days, maybe 4. Then he folded it up, put it in a drawer, and started over from a different angle. He pulled money from every corner he had. He called in favors. He worked nights and weekends for 18 months before he closed on his first property. Then his second. Then a third. He told nobody how hard it had been. He told nobody how close he had come to the edge, and he told nobody, not even Jerome, not even Delia, how far he had come since then. The number stayed quiet. 14 properties. His own. The morning notification came the way most things do. Small and unassuming. Easy to dismiss. A lifestyle blog post, surfaced by the algorithm that sorted his news feed. He almost scrolled past it. The thumbnail was a woman in a cream-wrapped dress, laughing on a sunlit terrace, a diamond ring catching the light. He recognized her before his brain had finished the thought. He clicked it. He didn't know why. He would ask himself that later. The headline read, "She Said Yes. Brielle Foster on Love, Leveling Up, and Never Settling." The interview was glossy and easy, and full of the kind of language people use when they've rehearsed the story of themselves until it sounds natural. The interviewer asked her about finding the right person. Brielle's answer came back smooth as polished stone. "I spent years, my mid to late 20s, in a relationship that was comfortable but going nowhere. He was a sweet guy, truly, but comfort isn't a plan. I had to ask myself, am I building a life, or am I just coasting with someone? I chose myself." Andre read that part twice. Then the interviewer asked if it had been hard to walk away. Brielle laughed. He could almost hear it, that light, unbothered sound she made when she wanted you to know something wasn't worth her weight. Honestly, Grant is the kind of man who moves with intention and confidence. My ex was brilliant in his own way, bless his heart, but he was always talking about what he was going to do someday. Someday was never coming. Andre closed the tab. He stood at the railing and looked at the skyline. The sun was coming up now, slow and certain, burning the purple out of the sky and replacing it with something cleaner. He breathed. He finished half his coffee. Then Jerome's text arrived. No message, just a screenshot. It was a comment from Brielle's public social page, a reply she had left for a follower who asked if she ever regretted leaving her previous relationship. Her answer was 6 weeks old and had 43 likes. Regret what? Leaving my loser ex who was all dreams and no dollars? Baby, Grant Hayes took me to Paris for our first anniversary. Paris. I'm good. Andre read it once. Then he read it again. He set his phone face down on the railing. He looked at the skyline. The city was fully awake now, loud and gold and indifferent, the way cities always are. He stood very still and let the morning hold him there. His phone buzzed against the railing. He turned it over. A text from Delia. No words, just a photo. His mother's kitchen table, morning light across the wood grain, and a cream-colored envelope sitting in the center of it, like something that had fallen from a different world. He could read his name from the photo. The handwriting was printed, clean, formal. His old address, Delia's address, the West End house where he grew up, written beneath it like whoever sent it hadn't bothered to find out where he actually lived. He stared at the photo for a moment. Then he picked up his coffee, drained the last of it, and went inside to get his keys. Delia Washington's house sat on a quiet block in the West End. A brick bungalow with a painted porch and a fig tree in the front yard that had been there longer than Andre had been alive. He pulled up at 7:30. She was already on the porch, coffee in hand, watching him come up the walk the way she always did, like she was reading him before he opened his mouth. He climbed the steps. She looked at his face. "You already saw something," she said. Not a question. "Blog post," he said. Jerome sent a screenshot after. She made a sound low in her throat, not quite a laugh, not quite disgust, and held the door open for him. The envelope was on the kitchen table, exactly where she'd photographed it. He picked it up. The paper was heavy in his hand, the kind of weight that costs money. He slid a finger under the flap and opened it carefully. Letterpress printing, gold foil on the border. Mr. Grant, Alan Hayes, and Miss Brielle Camille Foster request the honor of your presence. The Biltmore, Coral Gables, Florida. 6 weeks away. Black tie. Reception to follow. Delia sat down across from him and wrapped both hands around her mug. I never trusted her, she said. Plain as weather. I told you that once, and then I left it alone, because you're a grown man, and it wasn't my place. But since we're here, I remember, Andre said. She always looked at you like she was calculating something. Delia shook her head slowly, like you were a number she was still deciding on. Andre set the invitation down on the table. He didn't say anything for a moment. Outside, a car rolled past. The fig tree moved in a small wind. His phone rang. Jerome. He answered it and put it on speaker. Tell me you're not thinking about going, Jerome said, skipping hello entirely. He already knew. Andre could hear it. Jerome always knew, the same way he always knew everything that moved through their shared circle before it had finished moving. Patricia Foster apparently mentioned the invitation to somebody, Jerome continued, who mentioned it to my mother, who mentioned it to me at 7 in the morning, which is not when I wanted to be having this conversation. Small city, Andre said. Andre, man, you have 14 properties. You don't need this. Let her have her wedding, and her Grant Hayes, and her Paris anniversaries, and all of it. You're winning. You don't have to show up. Andre looked at the invitation on the table. Then he looked at his mother, who was watching him with the still, patient expression of a woman who already knew what he was going to say. I'm going, he said. A pause. Then, why? Because I want to look her in the eye. Jerome was quiet for 3 full seconds. That's not a strategy. That's an emotion. I'll call you tomorrow, Andre said, and ended the call. Delia looked at him over her coffee mug. She didn't push. That was the thing about his mother. She knew the difference between the moment to speak and the moment to simply be present. She had always known that. He stayed for another hour. They talked about other things. The fig tree, a neighbor's new baby, the Pittsburgh project and its permits. He drove home with the invitation on the passenger seat. That evening he sat alone in his home office, the room quiet around him, and the memory came back the way cold water does, sudden and total. The night before the loan denial letter arrived, Brielle had been at his apartment. She'd asked to borrow his laptop, just to check my email. Mine is being slow. And he had handed it over without a second thought. Why would he? It was Brielle. He had trusted her with larger things than a laptop. He had gone to make dinner. She had sat on the couch with the computer open for maybe 40 minutes. He hadn't watched. He hadn't needed to. 3 weeks later, she was gone. 3 weeks after that, the letter came. He sat with that memory now, turned it over, looked at it from all sides, and felt it settle into a shape he didn't have words for yet. Not anger. Not quite. Something quieter and more precise than anger. He opened his laptop. He found the RSVP card tucked inside the envelope's second fold. A small card. Simple. 2 boxes. Accepts with pleasure. Declines with regrets. He marked the first box. 1 guest attending. He slid the card into its return envelope, sealed it, and set it on the counter. He didn't hesitate. The master suite was quiet at noon. Andre stood in front of the mirror and worked the first cufflink through the French cuff, with the same patience he brought to everything. The onyx face caught the light, black and deep, set in a thin gold band, his father's. The only thing the man left behind besides a model of how to carry yourself when the world wasn't making it easy. He had owned this property for 14 months. 3 bedrooms, direct ocean view, a kitchen that still smelled faintly of the renovation. He hadn't stayed here many times, but he had stayed here tonight, and that had been intentional, not a hotel. His. The suit was charcoal chiton, bespoke, fitted to his exact frame by a tailor in New York, who had measured him 3 times and asked no questions. The fabric moved when he moved. The shoulders sat the way shoulders were supposed to sit. He buttoned the jacket slowly, checked the line of it, and turned from the mirror. He called down to the concierge at the property management desk. The confirmation came back in under a minute. The Silver Ghost was waiting in the lower garage, detailed and ready. He picked up his phone. No calls. 1 text from Jerome, sent an hour ago. "You sure about this?" Andre pocketed the phone without replying and walked out. He pulled off the Biltmore's entry road at 2:51 p.m. The circular drive was already crowded. Guests in black tie moving between cars and the hotel's grand entrance, valets weaving through the traffic in their white shirts, the whole scene dressed in the particular shine of old money on a good occasion. Grant Hayes's people. You could tell by the way they stood. Like the ground belonged to them personally. The rolls moved through the drive at a quiet roll. It stopped. The valet, young, dark-haired, already reaching for the door, paused when he saw what he was opening. Andre stepped out, without hurry. He straightened to his full height, tugged the left cuff of his shirt so the onyx cufflink was visible, and buttoned the middle button of his jacket with 2 fingers. He looked at the valet and handed him the key fob. "Keep it close," Andre said. He turned toward the entrance. The whispers started before he reached the first step. He didn't look for them. He could feel them the way you feel weather. Not one sound, but a shift in everything. A woman near the fountain said something to the man beside her and tilted her head. A group of 3 men near the door went quiet, in the particular way people go quiet when something changes the math of a room. Andre walked through it like it wasn't happening. Inside the lobby, the light was gold, and the flowers were enormous. White arrangements stacked on pedestals in every corner, the smell of them clean and expensive. Guests moved in clusters. A string quartet played something soft and unrecognizable near the far wall. Brielle's cousin, a tall woman with her hair pinned back, someone Andre had met once at a birthday dinner 4 years ago, saw him first. She went still. Then she turned and moved quickly through the crowd. Andre watched her go. He picked up a glass of water from a passing tray and waited. 30 seconds, maybe 40. Brielle came around the edge of the crowd with a smile already built on her face, the kind of smile you construct before you know who you're walking toward. She was in a white dressing robe, getting ready still, or just finished, and she looked exactly the way she always looked. Polished, put together. A person who never let the surface slip. Then she got close enough to see him clearly. The smile held, but something behind it shifted. Her eyes moved once, quickly, from his face to the suit to his face again. And in that half-second, he could see her recalculating. She had expected something. She had expected the man she left. Andre. Her voice was warm and practiced. "I'm glad you came." "Congratulations," he said. He kept his voice even and let the word stand on its own. He didn't add anything to it, didn't soften it or sharpen it. He held her eyes for 3 seconds, long enough for her to understand that the warmth she was performing had nowhere to land, and then he nodded once and moved to find his seat. Grant Hayes found him during the pre-ceremony gathering near the garden entrance. He was a big man, broad through the shoulders, with a golfer's tan and the relaxed posture of someone who had spent his whole life in rooms that defaulted to his preference. He extended a hand with a smile that didn't require anything from him. "Grant Hayes." A slight pause, just enough to be deliberate. "You're Brielle's friend from Atlanta?" Andre shook his hand. The grip was firm on both sides. "Something like that," Andre said. Grant's eyes held on him for a moment. Then they drifted, just briefly, just a glance, toward the front of the hotel, toward the circular drive visible through the lobby glass. The Silver Ghost sat where the valet had left it, angled slightly outward, catching the afternoon sun down the length of its hood. Grant looked back at Andre. Something moved behind his eyes that wasn't quite what it had been a moment ago. Andre gave him nothing. "Enjoy the evening," Andre said, and stepped away. The ceremony lasted 40 minutes. The cocktail hour followed on the terrace. Warm air, the smell of salt off the bay, white-jacketed servers moving through the crowd with trays of champagne. Andre stood near the stone railing with a glass he hadn't touched. His phone buzzed. "Jerome, you good?" Andre looked out at the water for a moment. Then he typed back, "I ran the loan denial again. Jerome." It wasn't the bank. 3 dots appeared, paused, appeared again. "What do you mean it wasn't the bank?" "I mean someone gave them a reason to say no. I mean someone made a call." The dots pulsed. Then, "How long do you need?" Andre looked out at the bay. The sun was dropping toward the water, turning everything amber and flat. "Give me 2 weeks." He pocketed his phone. He set the untouched champagne on the railing. He stood there a while longer, watching the light change on the water, and said nothing to no one. Andre landed at Hartsfield-Jackson at 6:14 in the morning. He had taken the first flight out of Miami. No checked bags, just the carry-on he'd packed for the weekend. The suit now folded carefully inside a garment bag, the onyx cufflinks zipped into the front pocket. He moved through the terminal the way he moved through everything, steady, no wasted steps, and was in his car and on I-20 before most people had finished their first cup of coffee. The Washington Property Group office sat on a quiet block in Inman Park. It was a converted Victorian, deep green paint, wide front porch, original windows with new glass. From the outside it looked like a private home. That was deliberate. Andre had bought the building 4 years ago, gutted it carefully, and kept everything about it that said, "Someone lives here. Someone cares about this." The office inside was clean and purposeful, walls lined with property maps and zoning documents, a long oak conference table at the center of the main room that had once been a dining room and still felt like one. Jerome's car was already in the driveway when Andre pulled up. Jerome was standing at the kitchen counter with a mug in each hand when Andre walked in. He held one out without a word. Andre took it, set his bag down by the door, and carried the coffee into the conference room. Jerome followed him in and sat down across the table. He looked like he hadn't slept more than a few hours. That was Jerome. When something was in motion, he couldn't leave it alone. "How was it?" Jerome asked. "What I expected," Andre said. He set the mug down and pulled out the chair at the head of the table. "And worse than I expected." Jerome waited. Andre looked at the table for a moment. Then he started talking. He laid it out the way he always laid things out. In order, without emotion, every piece placed where it belonged. The night before the loan denial, 3 years ago, Brielle had asked to use his laptop. Said she needed to check her email, that her phone was dead. He hadn't thought about it for a single second. He trusted her. The laptop was open. The cloud folder was right there on the desktop. The whole business plan, the full loan application, with every financial projection he had built over 2 years of night shifts and weekend work. His personal references, everything. It would have taken her less than 5 minutes to forward it. She was already with him, Andre said. Patricia told me she had been with Grant for at least 7 months before she ended things with me. 7 months, while she was sleeping in my house. Jerome set his mug down. Grant runs commercial real estate, Andre continued. Same industry, same regional market. If she handed him that folder, he would have known exactly what he was looking at. He would have known exactly who to call. And the loan officer just happened to say no, Jerome said. 3 weeks after she left me, Andre said. And I never got a clear reason. You remember, I went back twice. The second time, they wouldn't even put me in a room with anyone. Jerome was quiet. He was already doing what Jerome always did, running names, running networks, building the map of who knew who and where the lines connected. What do you need from me? He asked. Pull everything you can on the loan officer who signed that denial. Douglas Fitch. I need his employment timeline. Where he was before, where he went after. I need the dates. And I need to know if there's any overlap anywhere between his career and Hayes Capital Group. Jerome nodded slowly. That's going to take some digging. I know, Andre said. Take the time you need. But be clean about it. When am I ever not clean? Andre looked at him. Don't answer that, Jerome said, and picked up his mug. 8 days passed. Andre worked. He took 2 calls with a contractor in Birmingham about a commercial rehab project, reviewed lease agreements on a multifamily building in Decatur, and drove out twice to check the progress on a duplex renovation in East Atlanta. He kept his schedule full and his expression flat. He didn't bring up Fitch or Hayes or the folder with anyone. He just worked and waited, the way he always waited, without letting the waiting show on his face. Jerome called on the morning of the 9th day. No text first, just a call. Come in, he said. I have something. The folder was maybe 20 pages, printed and tabbed. Jerome had laid it on the conference table by the time Andre walked in. He was standing off to the side with his arms crossed, watching Andre the way you watch someone open something that's going to change things. Andre sat down. He opened the folder to the first tab. Douglas Fitch, Senior Loan Officer at Meridian Capital Lending through 2021. Denial letter signed March 14th. He left Meridian 4 months later, in July. Andre turned to the second tab. His next position, Director of Asset Operations at Cornerstone Property Management, a firm Andre had never heard of, but whose parent company was listed in the header of the letterhead, Hayes Capital Group. Andre read the page once, then he read it again. Then he closed the folder. The room was very quiet. Get Victor, he said. Victor Okafor's office was on the 14th floor of a glass building on Peachtree Street. The view faced north. On a clear morning, you could see the city stretch out in every direction. Cranes and rooftops and the thin green line of Piedmont Park cutting through the middle of it all. Andre had chosen Victor 3 years ago for one reason. The man did not waste words. In a world full of attorneys who charged by the hour and talked like it, Victor said exactly what needed to be said, and stopped there. He was 51 years old, Nigerian-born, and wore glasses with thin gold frames that made him look like a professor. He was not a professor. He was the kind of man who read a contract the way a surgeon read a body, looking for what was wrong before anything else. Jerome was already seated when Andre arrived. The folder was on the table, open to the first tab. Victor was standing at the window with his back to both of them, finishing a phone call. He wrapped it up in under 30 seconds, turned around, and sat down. He pulled the folder toward him without preamble. For several minutes, the room was quiet, except for the sound of pages turning. Victor worked through each tab methodically. He didn't react visibly. No raised eyebrows, no slow exhales. He just read. When he reached the last page, he closed the folder, set it squarely in front of him, and folded his hands on top of it. 3 claims, he said. Tortious interference with business relations, misappropriation of proprietary business information, and if the Fitch connection holds, civil conspiracy. Jerome leaned forward slightly. You're saying this is enough? I'm saying this is strong. Victor looked at Andre. The Fitch timeline is damaging. The pitch deck similarities are damaging. The cloud access logs establish opportunity. He paused. What I don't have yet is a first-hand account that places Brielle inside a relationship with Hayes before the breakup. Someone who can establish that the access to your materials was not incidental, that it was part of an ongoing arrangement. The room was quiet again. I know where to go, Andre said. Victor nodded once. He didn't ask who. He trusted that Andre knew what he was doing. Get me that account in writing, Victor said. Notarized. Then we talk next steps. Decatur was 20 minutes from Midtown with no traffic. Andre drove it alone. Jerome had offered to come. Andre told him no. Patricia Foster lived in a beige brick ranch on a quiet street lined with oak trees. The yard was neat, flower beds along the front walk, a small American flag by the door. She had lived in that house for over 20 years. She had made Andre dinner in that house. She had hugged him at Brielle's birthday parties and called him baby in the easy, unself-conscious way Southern women of her generation did when they meant it. He sat in the car for a moment before getting out. He was not angry. He had checked for anger on the drive over and hadn't found much of it. What he found instead was something quieter and heavier, the particular weight of walking toward a truth that should have reached him years ago. He rang the doorbell. Patricia opened the door almost immediately, like she had been watching for his car. She was a small woman, 63 years old, with silver-streaked hair pinned back and reading glasses pushed up on her forehead. Her face, when she saw him, moved through 3 expressions in about 2 seconds, something like pain, something like relief, and then the composed, careful look of a woman who had been holding something for a long time and was very tired of holding it. "Andre," she said softly, "come on in." She made coffee without asking if he wanted any. He sat at her kitchen table, the same table where she had once shown him the photo albums from Brielle's childhood, laughing at the gap-toothed school pictures, and waited while she moved around the kitchen with small, deliberate movements. She set the mugs down and sat across from him. She wrapped both hands around hers. She did not look at him directly at first. "I figured this day was coming," she said. "After the wedding, after she put all that on the internet about you." She shook her head slowly. "I told her that was beneath her. She didn't want to hear it." Andre didn't say anything. He just waited. Patricia looked up. "Christmas dinner," she said. 3 years ago. Brielle had set her phone down on the counter by the sink and it lit up while she was in the other room. She paused. The name on the screen was Grant Hayes. It wasn't the first time I'd seen that name on her phone. Andre's hands were still around his mug. "I waited until everyone left and I asked her about it. Privately. Just the 2 of us." Patricia's voice stayed level, but barely. "She told me it was nobody. I told her I wasn't stupid. She told me—" She stopped, drew a slow breath. "She told me if I said one word to you, or to anyone, she would cut me off. She would walk out of my life and not look back. She said it plainly. No drama in it. Just the truth of a woman who had been cornered by her own daughter and had chosen to stay quiet rather than lose her. That was 7 months before she ended things with you," Patricia said. Andre looked at the table. 7 months. He had spent those 7 months believing in something that had already been decided. He had been loyal to a version of his life that Brielle had already abandoned. She had sat across from him at dinner tables and slept on her side of his bed, and said, "I love you," and all of it had been performance. All of it had been a woman waiting for the right moment to exit toward something she had already chosen. He thought about the laptop, the folder on the desktop, the loan letter that came 3 weeks after she walked out. He had built 14 properties on the other side of that letter. He had rebuilt himself from the ground up, slowly and quietly, the way you rebuild something when you don't want anyone to see you struggling. And the whole time, he had never known the full shape of what was done to him. Now he did. Patricia reached across the table. She put her hand over his. "I am so sorry, baby," she said. "I should have told you. I didn't know what she was going to do with what she took. I just thought it was a shameful thing." Her voice broke slightly on the last word, and then held. "I didn't know she was going to take something from you." Andre looked at her hand on his. He looked at her face, the genuine sorrow in it, the guilt that had clearly lived there for a long time. "Thank you, Patricia," he said. Quiet. Even. He meant it. He drove home in complete silence. No music. No calls. He took the long way without meaning to, winding through streets he knew well, past neighborhoods he had watched change, and neighborhoods that hadn't changed at all. He didn't think in full sentences. He just drove and let the pieces settle into their final positions. He got home at 8:30. He went into his home office, a small room at the back of the house, one window facing the yard, shelves lined with binders and property files and 2 framed photographs, one of Delia, one of the West End block where he grew up, and he sat down at his desk. He did not turn on music. He did not pour a drink. He looked at what he had built. The files on the shelves, the maps pinned to the wall, the stack of executed contracts in the tray by his monitor. All of it assembled from nothing, all of it built on the far side of a betrayal he had never fully understood until today. He sat there until past midnight. The manila envelope landed on Andre's desk at 9:14 on a Tuesday morning. Jerome didn't say anything when he set it down. He just pulled up a chair, crossed his arms, and waited. Andre opened it. The cover page read, Hayes Capital Group, Southeast Corridor Residential Development Fund, Confidential Investment Overview. Clean logo, heavy paper stock, professional binding. The kind of document that cost real money to produce. He turned the first page, then the second. By the third page, he stopped and went back to the beginning. He needed to be sure he was seeing what he thought he was seeing. He was. "Where'd you get this?" Andre said. "Marcus Webb, over at Pinnacle Development. They got it 3 weeks ago for co-investment review." Jerome leaned forward and tapped the cover. "He owed me a favor. Now he doesn't." Andre turned pages slowly. Jerome watched him without speaking. It wasn't just the general concept. Any developer with a sharp eye could look at the Southeast Atlanta corridor and see what Andre had seen: the undervalued parcels, the transit access, the population pressure pushing outward from the city's core. That could be coincidence. That could be 2 smart people arriving at the same idea. But this wasn't that. Page 11 used the phrase phased absorption model, a term Andre had coined himself, not a standard industry term, something he had written into his original plan to describe the way each development phase would absorb displaced residents before the next phase broke ground. He had invented that phrase sitting at a folding table in a studio apartment 3 years ago at 2 in the morning. It was in Grant Hayes's pitch deck, word for word. Page 17 reproduced a chart, supply gap analysis, broken down by ZP code, that matched Andre's original projections with differences so minor they could only be explained by minor updates to reflect current market data. The underlying structure, the methodology, the specific zip codes selected, and the order in which they were prioritized. All of it. Page 22 outlined a financing strategy that mirrored Andre's in sequence and structure, right down to the timing of institutional equity entry relative to each project phase. Andre closed the deck. He set it flat on the desk. He put his hand on top of it, the way you put your hand on something to make sure it stays. He didn't even clean it up, Jerome said quietly. He didn't think he needed to. Andre looked at the cover page. He thought I was gone. Victor reviewed the deck that same afternoon. He read it in under 30 minutes, made a single page of handwritten notes, and looked up. "This substantiates the misappropriation claim significantly," Victor said. "The phased absorption language alone is notable. Combined with the zip code overlap and the Fitch timeline, you have a coherent, documentable pattern." He set his pen down. "I can have a demand letter ready by end of week." "Hold on that," Andre said. Victor looked at him. "I don't want to settle yet." Andre's voice was steady. "A settlement letter, Grant writes a check, he signs something, and it's done. He explains it away to his investors as a nuisance claim. Moves on." He shook his head. "I want him exposed first. I want his investors asking questions before he knows there's a problem." Jerome smiled. Just slightly. Victor considered this for a moment. "That's a legitimate strategic position. You're forcing a negotiation from a position of maximum pressure rather than opening one from a standing start. He needs to understand what he's sitting on before he knows who's sitting across from him, Andre said. Victor nodded. Then, tell me what you need. The move was simple. Clean. No fingerprints. Jerome had a contact, a commercial broker named Freddie Ossie, who operated in Atlanta and South Florida, and knew people across both markets without belonging fully to either camp. Freddie was discreet, professionally cautious, and owed Jerome 2 favors that had been accumulating interest for 18 months. Jerome reached out. He asked Freddie to pass a quiet word to 2 of Grant's institutional investors. Not a letter, not a document, just a suggestion. The kind that gets made over the phone between people who move in the same professional circles. The suggestion: before committing capital to the Southeast Corridor Fund, it might be worth doing independent diligence on where the core concept originated. Just something to consider. No source given. No documentation attached. A question, planted in the right place at the right time. That was all. Grant's response came fast. Jerome tracked it through 2 people in his network over the next 4 days. Grant was making calls. His attorney, a private investigator firm he had used before, 2 contacts inside institutional lending. He was trying to identify where the question had come from. His voice on one relayed account was described as controlled but tight, the kind of controlled that takes effort. He had no idea where to look. And because he had no idea, he looked everywhere. Competitors, former partners, people he had beaten on deals. He ran through names. He made calls he probably shouldn't have made, calls that left traces and made people wonder. He never looked at Andre Washington, not once. Brielle called Patricia on a Thursday evening. Patricia told Andre about it the next morning, over the phone, her voice low and careful. She called me asking if everything was okay, Patricia said, which means Grant told her something was wrong, and she didn't know where else to put it. A pause. She said Grant thought a competitor had gotten wind of his fund. She said he was sure that's what it was. Andre listened without speaking. She sounded scared, Patricia said. Not for him, for herself. Thank you, Patricia, Andre said. He set the phone down on his desk. He looked out the window at the street below. Morning traffic, ordinary Tuesday, the city moving at its own pace. Grant Hayes was out there right now, calling people, pulling at threads, looking in every direction but the right one. Andre made the call on a Wednesday morning. Freddie Ossie picked up on the second ring. I need a favor, Andre said. You and Jerome both, Freddie said. There was warmth in it, no complaint. What do you need? I need you to set up a meeting. Tell Grant Hayes you have a private equity group looking for a Southeast Corridor development partner, someone who already has the concept built out and needs a capital partner to scale it. Andre paused. Make it sound like they came to you specifically because of his fund. A beat of silence. Then, you want him to walk in expecting money. Yes. Another pause. Freddie was thinking it through. Where? Victor Okafor's office. Midtown. Freddie let out a slow breath. He understood exactly what that meant. All right, he said. Give me a few days. It took 3. Grant accepted the meeting without hesitation. Freddie reported back that Grant had asked 2 questions: the size of the equity group and whether they had existing relationships in the Southeast market. Freddie answered both questions smoothly and vaguely, the way brokers do when they want to keep someone moving forward without giving them enough to verify. Grant apparently didn't push. He was too interested to push. He confirmed the meeting for a Thursday at 11 a.m. He said he would bring his advisor. Andre listened and said, "Thank you." Then he called Victor and told him to have everything ready. The conference room at Victor Okafor's law firm was on the 14th floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows on one side, a long mahogany table running the length of it. The room smelled like leather and recycled air. It was the kind of room where serious things got decided, and nobody raised their voice. Andre arrived 40 minutes early. He set the binder in the center of the table himself, 4 inches thick, tabbed and organized. He had read every page of it more than once, but he didn't need to read it again. He knew what was in it the way you know the rooms of a house you built with your own hands. He sat at the head of the table. Victor sat to his right, a legal pad in front of him, pen uncapped. They didn't talk much while they waited. There wasn't anything left to say. At 11:03, the receptionist's voice came through the phone on the credenza. "Mr. Hayes and his associate are here." Victor said, "Send them in." The door opened. Grant Hayes walked in first. He had the particular energy of a man who expected to be the most important person in any room he entered. Shoulders back, a ready smile, the kind of confidence that came from never being surprised. His advisor followed behind him, a younger man in a blue suit carrying a leather portfolio. Grant's eyes moved to the table first, the binder, the legal pad, Victor's pen, then to Victor, then to Andre. The smile stopped. His face did what faces do when the mind is catching up. Recognition, then a flash of something close to confusion, then a careful, deliberate reassembly of composure. It took about 2 seconds. He was good at it, but Andre had been watching for it. Grant stood very still in the doorway. "Washington," he said. His voice was even, just barely. "Mr. Hayes." Andre gestured to the chairs across the table. "Please sit down. This won't take long." Grant looked at the binder. He looked at Victor. He looked back at Andre. Then he pulled out the chair directly across from Andre and sat. His advisor sat beside him, already leaning close, already whispering. Grant held up one hand without looking at him. A flat, practiced gesture. "Not now." Victor opened the binder to the first tab and turned it so it faced Grant. "I'll walk you through what we have," Victor said. He spoke the way he always spoke. Clean, level, without any edge that could be called aggressive. Just facts, arranged in sequence. Tab 1. Mr. Washington's original business plan. Cloud access logs from the platform where the documents were stored, showing a login from an unregistered device on the evening of March 4th, 2021. He tapped the page. The loan denial arrived March 7th. Grant said nothing. Victor turned to the second tab. Douglas Fitch, loan officer. He processed and denied Mr. Washington's application. He resigned from First Meridian 4 months later and accepted a position with Ardmore Property Solutions. Another page turned. Ardmore is a subsidiary of Hayes Capital Group. Grant's jaw tightened, just slightly. Andre watched it happen and said nothing. Tab 3. Victor placed Grant's pitch deck beside Andre's original projections, opened to the same pages, side by side. He didn't explain it. He let Grant look at it. Tab 4. Victor slid a single notarized page forward. A written account from Patricia Foster, confirming that Brielle Foster was in contact with you at minimum 7 months prior to the end of her relationship with Mr. Washington, and that Mr. Washington's professional materials were accessible to her during that period. Grant's advisor leaned in again. This time he made it further before Grant cut him off. "You can't prove intent," Grant said. His voice was still controlled. His eyes were not. Andre looked at him calmly. "I don't need to prove intent to a jury." He let that land. "I only need to prove it to your investors." Grant held his gaze for a moment. Something moved behind his eyes. Not guilt. Nothing that clean. Just the cold arithmetic of a man who had just realized the numbers didn't work in his favor. Victor reached into the folder beside him and slid a document across the table. Clean letterhead. Multiple pages. "This letter is addressed to each of your institutional partners," Victor said. "It contains the material in this binder, summarized and documented. It goes out in 48 hours unless we reach an agreement today." Grant looked at the letter. He looked at Andre. The room was very quiet. Then Grant Hayes reached forward, picked up his advisor's pen, and held it. Grant held the pen for a moment longer than necessary. It was the only thing he had left. That pause, that small, final performance of a man pretending he still had a choice to make. Then he set the pen to the paper and signed. His advisor looked at the table. Not at Grant, not at Andre, not at Victor. Just the table. The leather portfolio in front of him stayed closed. He had stopped being useful about 20 minutes ago and seemed to know it. Victor collected the documents without ceremony. He stacked them neatly, aligned the edges, slid them into a manila folder, and clipped it shut. His face showed nothing. This was just work to him. Thorough, well-prepared work. And it had gone exactly as thorough, well-prepared work usually goes. The settlement terms had not been negotiated so much as presented. Andre had named his number before the meeting began, and it was precise. Not a figure pulled from anger, a figure built from research. The current market value of the 3 commercial properties Grant had acquired in the months after Andre's loan was denied, the properties that sat squarely inside the zip codes Andre had flagged in his original projection. The properties Grant had picked up at distressed 2021 prices, while the market was still soft, and Andre was still scraping himself off the floor. Andre wanted the value calculated at what those properties were worth now, today, after 3 years of appreciation and development. Not what Grant paid, what they had become. That was the number. Grant had pushed back twice. Both times Victor had slid the investor letter half an inch closer to his side of the table without a word. By the second time, Grant stopped pushing. The second document was the affidavit. 1 page, plain language. Grant Hayes confirming, under notarization, that he had made use of proprietary business materials belonging to Andre Washington without authorization. The affidavit would be held by Victor's firm. It would not be filed, not published, not shared, as long as neither Grant nor Brielle ever misrepresented what had happened between them and Andre. If that day came, Victor would know what to do with it. Andre did not ask for an apology. He hadn't come here for one, and wouldn't have trusted one if it arrived. There was nothing Grant could say that would mean anything, and they both understood that. What mattered was on paper now, signed and dated and witnessed. He didn't make a speech either. There was nothing to perform. The binder had said everything. Once Victor confirmed all signatures were complete, Andre stood. He buttoned his jacket, 1 button, unhurried, and picked up his phone from the table. He looked at Grant once more, directly. The way you look at a thing you are finished with. Grant was staring at the settlement agreement in front of him. He didn't look up. "Thank you, Victor," Andre said. "Of course," Victor said. Andre walked out. The lobby of the building was cool and quiet, all marble floors and low light. Jerome was standing near the window that faced the street, one hand in his pocket, watching the traffic below. He turned when he heard the elevator open. He read Andre's face in about half a second. Then he let out a long breath and said nothing. They rode the elevator down together in silence, the kind of silence that didn't need filling. On the street, the Atlanta afternoon was bright and warm, the kind of day that didn't care what had just happened 14 floors up. The city moved the way it always moved, loud, fast, indifferent to individual reckonings. Jerome stepped off the curb slightly, shook his head once. Slow. "Man," he said quietly. That was all. Andre looked at him. And then, not wide, not loud, just a small thing at the corner of his mouth. He smiled. It wasn't triumph. It wasn't satisfaction exactly, though satisfaction was somewhere in it. It was something closer to completion. The feeling of a door finally closing flush, the latch catching the way it was always supposed to. Jerome saw it and nodded, like he understood completely. Because he did. "Take the rest of the day," Andre said. Jerome looked at him. "You sure?" "Yeah." Andre pulled his keys from his pocket. Go. Jerome pointed at him once. Not a word, just a gesture. The kind between two people who have known each other long enough that gestures carry full sentences. And then he walked. Andre drove home alone. He didn't play music. He didn't call anyone. He moved through the city the way you move when you're not running from something or toward something, just traveling the distance between where you were and where you're supposed to be. He got home. He poured a glass of water. He sat on the edge of his bed in the quiet of his room. He lay back, and for the first time in 3 years, the low, persistent tension that had lived in the center of his chest since the morning the denial letter arrived, the thing he had carried so long he'd nearly stopped noticing it, was simply gone. He closed his eyes. He slept. 2 days after the settlement, Andre sent Brielle a text. No preamble. No explanation. Just a restaurant name in Buckhead. And a time, Tuesday, noon. She responded in 4 minutes. Yes, that was how he knew she'd already talked to Grant. She was there before him. He spotted her through the window as he walked up, sitting at a corner table, back straight, hands folded on top of the menu. She wasn't reading. She was dressed well. Of course she was. A cream blouse, gold earrings, her hair pinned back exactly right. Brielle had always understood that looking composed was the first layer of defense, but he had known this woman for 4 years. He knew the way her jaw set when she was afraid. He knew it the moment he pushed through the door. She watched him cross the room. Her eyes moved to the door behind him, then back, checking if he'd brought anyone. He hadn't. He sat down across from her. The server came. Andre ordered a coffee, black. Brielle shook her head slightly. Nothing for her. Her water glass was already half empty. They looked at each other. "Hey," she said. Her voice was steady, practiced. "Hey." He set his phone face down on the table. "Thanks for coming." "Of course." She tilted her head a fraction. The old Brielle move, warm, open, disarming. "Andre, I just want to—" "Let me go first," he said. Not harsh, not loud, just a fact. She closed her mouth. He walked her through it the way Victor had walked Grant through the binder, methodically. No emotion loading the words, just the words themselves, which were heavy enough on their own. He told her about the night she borrowed his laptop. The cloud folder, his business plan, his loan application, his full financial projections and personal references, all of it sitting there in a folder called WPG Launch, a name she would have recognized immediately because she had heard him talk about it for 2 years. He told her about the access logs, timestamps, her activity on his account, 14 minutes long, the night before the denial letter was set in motion. He told her about Douglas Fitch, the loan officer who said no, who left the lending institution 4 months later, who landed inside a property management subsidiary of Hayes Capital Group. He told her about the 3 commercial properties Grant acquired in the ZIP codes Andre had flagged, acquired cheap at distressed prices, right in the window after the denial came through. He told her about Grant's investor pitch deck. The language pulled almost word for word from Andre's original projections, the same geographic strategy, the same phased approach. He told her about Patricia. That one landed differently. Her face shifted, a small crack in the composed surface. She hadn't expected her mother. She gave a written account, Andre said. Notarized. The timeline. What she saw on your phone at Christmas dinner. 7 months before you left me. Brielle looked at the table. 7 months, he said again. Not to wound her, just because it was the fact. The server brought his coffee. He thanked her. Brielle didn't move. Grant signed a settlement 2 days ago, Andre said. Financial restitution at current market value on everything he acquired from my blueprint, and an affidavit, signed and notarized, confirming what he used and where it came from. Brielle's eyes came back up. Something moved through them. It wasn't grief, exactly. It was the look of someone watching a wall they built brick by brick get taken apart and laid out flat on the ground in front of them. "Andre," she started. "I didn't know what he was going to do with it." He said it before she could. The exact words, her exact voice. He'd heard them before she spoke them. She stopped. "You gave him my business plan, Brielle." Quiet. "You gave him the loan application. You gave him 3 years of work I hadn't shown anyone." He picked up his coffee cup and held it. "You were with him for 7 months before you ended things with me. And 3 weeks after you left, 3 weeks, the denial letter showed up." The restaurant moved around them. A table nearby laughed at something. A dish clattered in the kitchen. The world kept going. Brielle said nothing. There was nothing that fit. He watched her understand that in real time. The slow, private collapse of a story she had lived inside for 3 years. The story where she was a woman who made a bold choice and moved forward. That story didn't have Douglas Fitch in it. It didn't have timestamps or notarized accounts or a settlement number. It didn't have her mother's handwriting on a sworn statement. This story did. He let the silence sit for a moment. Then he set down his coffee cup, placed his napkin on the table, and stood. He reached into his jacket pocket and left a folded bill near the edge of the table for the server. Because he'd ordered something, and he was raised right. He looked at Brielle one last time. "I didn't come here for an apology," he said. His voice was even, almost gentle. "I came here so that for the rest of your life you know exactly what you did. And you know that I know. And you know that I'm fine." He buttoned his jacket, and he walked out without looking back. The pastor's voice was low and steady, the kind of voice built for open air. "Lord, we ask that you bless these hands and this ground. Bless the work. Bless the people it is built for. And bless the one who saw what this neighborhood could still become." Andre stood with a shovel in his hands and the Georgia mourning on his face and said nothing. He didn't need to. To his left, Jerome stood with his own shovel, wearing a hard hat slightly too big for his head, and looking genuinely unbothered by this fact. To his right, Delia Washington stood in her good coat, charcoal gray, the one she wore to church and to things that mattered. She had her head bowed. Her eyes were closed. Around them, maybe 60 people had gathered on the vacant lot at the corner of Pittsburgh Avenue. Neighbors, city council members, a few local contractors, 2 journalists from the Atlanta Voice and the AJC. Behind them, a banner read, "Washington Property Group, Pittsburgh Neighborhood Development, 30 units, mixed income, built to last." The pastor said, "Amen." Delia opened her eyes, and without a word, without looking at him, she reached over and squeezed Andre's arm once. Just her hand on his forearm through his jacket sleeve, brief and complete. He squeezed back. Jerome caught it from the corner of his eye and looked away quickly, which was the most respectful thing Jerome Cross had ever done in his life. The shovels went into the ground. Cameras clicked. Someone started clapping, and the whole crowd picked it up. Andre smiled. Not the careful, measured expression he had worn in conference rooms and hotel lobbies, and a certain cocktail hour in Coral Gables. A real one. The kind that came up from somewhere deeper than strategy. He had grown up 4 blocks from this corner. He had ridden his bike past this lot as a kid when it was a hardware store, and then when it was empty, and then when the weeds came. His mother had lived within walking distance of this ground for 40 years. The 30 families who would eventually call this place home did not know any of that, and they didn't need to. He knew. That was enough. The weeks after the groundbreaking moved quietly. The project was underway. Jerome was running the operational side with the focused, relentless energy he brought to everything that had a deadline and a budget. He was a full equity partner now, had been since the settlement closed, though the paperwork had taken 3 months to finalize. It was not a gift. Jerome had earned it across years of work that Andre had watched closely and valued precisely. The promotion simply made the arrangement honest. Andre was in his Inman Park office on a Tuesday afternoon when Patricia called. He answered on the second ring. She didn't spend much time on small talk. She never did with Andre, which was one of the things he respected about her. She told him what she had heard. Grant's Southeast Corridor Fund was done. 2 of his institutional investors had pulled out after conducting independent due diligence, the kind of careful, source-checking review that sophisticated money runs when someone plants a quiet question in the right ear and then waits. The investors had cited concerns about the origins of the underlying concept. No lawsuit, no public statement. Just the particular, devastating silence of money leaving the room. Grant was not broke. He still had properties, still had staff, still had his name on a building in Midtown. But he was operating smaller now. The ambition that had driven him to take what wasn't his had brought him to a version of his life that barely resembled the one he'd been building. In certain circles, the institutional ones, the ones that moved real capital, his name came with an asterisk now. The kind of asterisk people didn't explain, they just felt. Patricia told Andre all of this without pleasure. She was not a woman who enjoyed other people's collapse, even when they had earned it. Then she paused, and her voice shifted just slightly, and she told him about Brielle. She said it carefully. She said her daughter had the house in Coral Gables, the husband, the life she had moved toward for years. She said Brielle seemed, and here Patricia stopped and chose her words slowly, unsettled, like someone wearing shoes that looked right, but didn't fit. She wasn't unhappy in ways she could point to or explain. She was unhappy in ways she couldn't name, which was its own kind of sentence. Patricia said she wasn't telling him this to wound anyone. She said it because she thought he deserved to know. Andre thanked her. He meant it. He sat with the information for a moment after the call ended. He waited for something to move in his chest. Anger, satisfaction, the old ache. He waited honestly, gave it space to arrive. Nothing came. Not numbness, not suppression, just nothing. The way a room feels after you've finally cleared it out. Clean, open, ready for whatever comes next. He set his phone down and got back to work. 5 weeks later, on a Thursday morning at 5:47 a.m., Andre stood on the Buckhead rooftop with his coffee and the Atlanta skyline ahead of him. The city looked the same as it always did at this hour, still and lit and full of itself. His phone buzzed on the railing. A message from a woman named Camille. He'd met her at a housing symposium 3 months ago, where she'd argued with a city planner for 11 straight minutes about affordable zoning policy and been completely right the entire time. She was sharp in a way that didn't perform itself. She was funny without trying. She had texted him good morning 4 times now, and each time it had felt like something he didn't know he was waiting for. Good morning. Hope your Thursday is better than my Wednesday. Which, fair warning, that is a low bar. He smiled. It arrived on his face without any effort at all. He typed back and sent it and set his phone down. He looked at the skyline. He finished his coffee. Then he went to work. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.